You ever had a Krispy Kreme?
What'd you say about Krispy Kreme?
You ever had a Krispy Kreme?
Have I ever had a Krispy Kreme? I would like to ask a Krispy Kreme if they haven't seen me.
Was it crispy?
That is actually a really good question because no, Krispy Kremes aren't necessarily crispy. They are very creamy.
Right.
They are very creamy. And when I see that red light on, you better move out of the way. You better move out of the way because I know they're hot and fresh.
I say this with love, with adoration, with respect for you, with actual jealousy.
This was like a thing?
Yeah, and it's actually what's so crazy. Yeah, it's a TikTok, and it's a TikTok from like a year and a half ago.
That's like not even funny.
And
Joe.
I've actually been there with you because I've quoted that probably 55 times in this podcast.
And I always am like, of course I'm going to.
And we were with somebody one time, and he quoted it to you, and you didn't know, and he was like, "No, it's this TikTok," and then pulled out his phone and showed you the TikTok. And I watched this happen as a bystander, being like, it's crazy that I'm watching Andrew, who I thought was understanding the joke for the past year, learn about this. So actually, there is so many layers to this, and I feel bad because it feels like entrapment, because I know that it's almost like elder abuse.
It is like
elder abuse.
You need to realize something, okay? I just want to harp on a few things here.
Yeah, harp.
Let me go.
Harp away,
let me strum these strings for a second. One, I told you yesterday, I'm not really on TikTok, right? Like I try to scroll.
She's a pretty popular video. I mean, it's like you
also
have seen it before.
I haven't stopped strumming yet. Number two.
Oh, we were harping, right?
Number two, I do vaguely remember being shown this video. There are so many things that happened to me in my life that I then forget.
We were in the middle of Times Square, so that doesn't help. And you know who I think we saw right after was George Santos.
Exactly. And he was getting a hot dog.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that. But it's really tough, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily entrapment. I would just say like it sucks to feel like you're out of the loop. And I can stay in the loop. I can stay in the donut shop. Like, and have I ever had a Krispy Kreme? What was the response to that?
Yeah.
There you go.
Was it crispy?
No.
Right.
Good children.
I am Joe Hegyes.
And I'm Andrew Muscarella.
And this is
Good Children.
And I am running on 2 hours of sleep.
But we have grown together for the past 24 years.
And now it's time for us to grow up. Today we have a true mogul, I would argue, of the industry in which we're so blessed to be a part of.
One of the most intellectual, comedic, talented, gay Long Islanders, and we're not talking about us.
Right. Yeah. We're talking about one of the other few.
One of the other few.
This person's a former political speechwriter. They are a screenwriter. They are a podcaster, and they are a comedian. And it is John Lovett. It is kind of actually really, I'll say, very intimidating to have you on as a guest because I do feel like you kind of set a standard.
Yeah.
For doing this.
The podcaster.
Wow, that's so nice of you to say. I would get that out of your mind. I wouldn't worry about that.
As we're like spiraling.
Why don't we get 10 minutes in and then I think you'll feel more comfortable.
Well, I just think that I'm really, really, really excited to have you because we share 3 really important things in common.
Okay.
Number 1 is podcasting.
Right.
Number 2 is being from Long Island.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I probably should have said that third because the third one is being gay.
Right.
But
Right.
there are a lot of gay podcasters out there, but
From
they
Long
don't
Island.
From Long Island?
There are,
yeah.
I was thinking about this before. There's actually more that I could name than I couldn't.
We're not unique.
Pat Reagan, Matt Rogers. End of list. Us.
And what a list it is.
What else could you
I feel
possibly
really
say?
good about that group.
Yeah.
What a group.
It's really a lineup.
Yeah, all of us saying Mario wrong.
Mario.
How do you say Florida?
Florida.
Exactly.
Orange.
It's amazing. Where did you grow up?
Syosset, Woodbury. Yeah.
Okay. We're from Farmingdale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right up the road.
It's really
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Yeah, there's we would go there to hit golf balls.
Wow.
There was like a range there in Farmingdale.
Oh, there was.
And there was a movie theater.
Yes.
There was a movie theater. It was a big
The
movie
UA.
theater. Yes.
You're thinking multiplex.
Oh.
Are
But
you?
it wasn't Farmingdale.
Right? The big movie theater? Multiplex.
You think the multiplex is bigger than United Artists?
Absolutely,
Oh, yes. I'm
Joe.
sorry. I was thinking opposite just now.
I know
Yeah,
you
the
were.
multiplex, Airport Plaza.
Because it'd be kind of thing where you kind of cast a wider and wider net until, and you're like, we're going to Farmingdale.
Yeah.
It's a Farmingdale. It's just a
It's a
Farmingdale
Farmingdale
night.
night. You would be surprised because that golf putting green or the or whatever
Range
that's
or-
called.
yeah,
The
whatever that's
Range.
called.
Thank you. I don't know sports. Is now just another shopping center.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And I think
Good.
it sat abandoned on that road for a decade, like
Mm-hmm.
nets ripping into the wind.
Yeah.
Wow, that's sad. That's hard to hear.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
That's
really
hard
hard.
to
I'm
hear.
sorry to start you off with
No,
that.
the only constants is change, you know.
Yeah.
And that's was a first set about Farmingdale.
Yeah, there it is. What was it like growing up on Long Island as a gay boy? Because we've talked about it all the time.
You know, what was it like? I look back on it now, and I feel like gay was the least of my problems. Like, yes,
Oh my God, there's so many problems.
yes. I think the difference, even before you have a word for it, is isolating. You're just different, and you don't even have a sexual. There's a great Simpsons where one of them calls the kids gay, and he goes like, "I'm not gay. I'm nothing yet."
Yeah.
And like when we will become gay, but at the time we're just slightly effeminate in
Yeah.
certain ways, confused by the protocols,
Yep.
emotional in ways that aren't similar to the other boys, and it's all a little bit isolating even before you've figured out
Yep.
that you're gay at some time later. And I've thought about it a lot, actually. It truly took me till I was much older to look back on, like, Long Island to me felt like a place where it was not just like, it wasn't just unusual, but simply not talked about to have like desires that weren't practical, right? There wasn't a lot for me of like indulging in fantasy, right? It's just
Yeah.
like a practical place. Maybe that's a Jewish thing too,
Okay.
which is just like, it was a lot of like, do you want to be a lawyer? Do you want to be a doctor? What do you want to be when you grow up? Is such a crazy question to be the first question, but it was so practical, and it never occurred to me to think as a kid, like, what do I enjoy?
Yeah.
What's fun for me? It was always more like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, what's the things that, what are the right, like, how am I going to perform? And even before you think about college, it's just like, how
Yeah.
am I going to be a good boy? And you're thinking, and
Exactly.
it is very best little boy in the world, but it took me until much later in life just to think about what I was pursuing as being a pursuit worth it for its own sake. And I had to like deprogram myself. And I think that is a Long Island.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an everywhere thing, but it's a particularly strong Long Island thing.
Yeah, it's still conversations now. I mean, like, there are so many, I think, societal pressures from Long Island. Like, growing up, to your point, my parents are like, when are you going to law school? I'm
Yeah.
like, Mom, I'm
Like,
a
to this day,
podcaster.
yeah.
She's like, what's that? And I'm like, okay. I'm always constantly trying to explain and validate what you're doing to be successful, because success, I feel like, for a lot of families on Long Island is like the title of the job that you
Yeah.
hold. And yeah, it is deprogramming a lot, even with the gay space. Like, specifically what you said too, like, it was people outing you before you were comfortable with saying who you were. But I think it was also like the culture of Long Island that kept you hiding a little bit more than like just being free with being who you are.
My parents, I give a lot of credit to, because so my father ended up taking over the family business. There was a box factory, a small box factory. And it was my grandfather's box factory. Then my father took it over. And his parents were pretty prescriptive about like what they were going to be. And to his credit, my father it was very important to him to say, my kids can be whatever they want to be. They don't have to go into any specific kind of work. I want them to pursue whatever they want to pursue. So I never felt any pressure in that way. It's almost like an unspoken lack of passion that I felt growing up, that like that to be passionate was in some way like embarrassing. It was cringe. And I so internalized that. It wasn't even that I fought against that. I didn't have the wherewithal to fight against that. I didn't have the like, I was such a rule follower that wouldn't even have occurred to me to break the rules or to be felt restricted by them. Those were just the rules.
Right.
And then you get a little bit older, and I had this whole like, very successful career. Like just I like got to do the things I dreamt of doing, and I don't know that I got as much fulfillment out of it as I could have. And it wasn't until much later that I stopped and thought, okay, great, you did those things. What do you want? Like, forget what do you want to be. What do you want to be doing?
Yeah, when did that first like crack in the veneer happen?
So it really was, I think I was almost 30.
Okay.
And so when I graduated from college, I did come to New York, and I was doing open mics while I was applying for law school.
Of course.
Right.
Classic.
I was being a paralegal
Yep.
during the day. and then at night I would do open mics, and then I would do my law school applications, and that was my bargain.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up getting an internship in politics, and one thing led to another. I became a political speechwriter, and I still felt this pull. Like, here I have this amazing opportunity to be a political speechwriter, something I imagined doing when I was watching The West Wing. I got the job.
Yeah.
Right? The job you get. The job in The West Wing is the job I got after
Right.
watching The
So
West
crazy.
Wing and wanting that job.
Yeah.
That's insane. And I do that for a bunch of years. I'm exhausted, and I still feel this pull of comedy or like writing or performing. And I move out to LA, and I think, all right, now I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to finally figure it out. And again, like it's hard to talk about because I know, like, if anybody who's listening to this has been fighting and sweating and working to like break in, like so I moved to LA and I sold a pilot and it got picked up. Happened,
amazing.
and that's insane.
Crazy.
And
Yeah,
I know it's
crazy.
crazy. I know, and there's no way I can talk about it without it being like frustrating. Whatever. That's what happened.
No, I don't think that it sounds like you're like being gloaty remotely.
No.
or anything.
I know, but even like
At
playing it
all.
down, it's like anyway.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate, but so I think I'm gonna have some time to figure out what I want to be doing, and then this thing takes off, and I'm working just as hard and feeling just as overwhelmed in TV as I did when I was in politics, and then I get a phone call, the show is canceled, and then all of a sudden I live in LA. I'm in a duplex apartment because that's all I could afford on my government when I had no money when I moved out to LA. I don't really have that many friends in Los Angeles. I don't know what I'm doing there. I'm not sure that I really want to be there. And that was the first moment where I thought, well, what am I doing here? Like, I've been doing these ambition things. Like, I've just been doing the next cool big thing that I thought would give me the validation I wanted. And now I'm not so sure. And it took me I think I got pretty depressed after that, right? Because, all right, well, I dreamt of being a presidential speechwriter. That happened. Amazing. I wanted to create a TV show. That happened. Amazing. Well, here I am in this apartment ordering takeout. And like, I don't know, it took me a beat from there to start kind of crawling my way back to thinking about things less in terms of like how they would look and more of like what I would enjoy, what I would learn from, and actually internalizing something everyone says when you're younger and nobody truly believes, which is it's all about like what you learn, right? Every job, every opportunity, think about how much you can learn. And I finally started thinking more like that, and that was very good for me.
And then that led you to podcasting and comedy.
crooked
Eventually,
media.
eventually. Yeah, I had a lost year where I was writing a pilot, and then I was doing speechwriting for hire for companies. I like flew to other countries and would write speeches for executives in other countries who were trying to like learn how to be. They all wanted to be like a Steve Jobs figure when they did their presentations for their annual conferences, and so they would hire these speechwriters, and you would try to help them figure out how to like be cool on stage. So that was a brief foray that I did, and then eventually, as in the run up to the 2016 election, I did a podcast with a couple friends, and that became eventually Pod
Media.
Save America.
Yeah, and Pod Save America.
That's really okay. I am so curious. Was like, first of all, how were your English Regents results? How were those? Because I can only imagine they were pretty fucking good.
They were pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Hey, I did okay in the Regents.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Of course.
No
No one's asking that
asked me
about
about
No
that.
one's asking
No.
about
No one
that.
asked me about
And
the
that's-
Regents.
No, it's the New Yorkers. Yeah.
So was like growing up, obviously you had this standard set, you had to kind of achieve these goals, but when you were like in high school, did you feel that pull towards English or towards entertainment? Like, were you watching comedy? Were you reading classics? Like, what led to everything that's happened since?
It was speech and debate. I
Okay.
did the
Oh, that
Friends
makes total
Club.
sense.
I did
That
the
makes
Friends
sense.
Club,
was
and
an
that was a
option.
big deal for me. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends. At times, I had no friends, but I could do either extemp was a category, or OO was a category, or oratory was a category, and then you would go on these trips and with the other nerds on the team, and you'd have this weekend away, and you'd compete, and you would either do well or you wouldn't, and you'd go to the ceremony with like that was where I think most like that was when I was most excited and felt most, I think, seen. I like never really felt, I think probably because I was uncomfortable in my own body, I could never audition for a play or
Yeah, same.
do anything like that. And I do think that like yeah, I like really struggled with how I felt about myself emotionally, physically, and that made me feel less like I could perform. But speech and debate was less like that. It felt more like intellectual,
Right.
and more about what you were saying, and so I felt comfortable doing that, and that was my way in.
When do you feel like things changed with like at least feeling comfortable and like being able to then perform? Because I feel like right now too, you're not only really knowledgeable, but you talk about politics in such a digestible way and like comedic way that makes it like, you know, for anybody to listen and take something from it.
That's very nice of you to say. I really think it took until I was like 40 years old.
Yeah.
It really does. Like I'm older than you guys. I also like was in a long-term relationship that ended, and the company Pod Save America is part of Crooked Media. Love it or Leave It is part of Crooked Media, and we had built it, and it felt finally that we had built something that was going to last. And I went through this real period of change where finally I felt like, okay. And it took a really long time. It just takes a really, and you know what? I am sure I will look back on this moment in my life and think, oh, you were still on your way. And you're always sort of on your way. I think about all the therapists I have had over the years who I now in hindsight realize were like talking to a brick wall. And I remember like having like a lot of conversations about like how unhappy I was with how I looked.
Yeah.
And she just kept saying, that's how you look. It's okay. Like, just, that's you. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's how you look. That's
Right.
okay. Like, people love it. You have relationships. You're like, this is how you look, and it's okay. And they're like, what are you talking about? That's no, it isn't.
Yeah.
You're wrong, lady.
It's hard to process.
Go find another one.
Exactly.
We'll
You're not
indulge
talking
this
to the
a bit
right
more.
person. Yeah.
But in a broader way, I think part of getting comfortable with yourself is truly being comfortable with, oh, like, this flaw is something I should work on, but it's part of a deeper, like, it's a negative aspect of a positive part of who I am, right? Like, sometimes I can be rude, but that's part of being direct, right? Or sometimes I need to leave a party or I'm not having a good conversation, but that's because I see the world in a strange way, whatever it may be. And like actually accepting those parts of yourself, and even the parts of yourself, a lot of times the things that like make us the most uncomfortable about ourselves are negative aspects of something that's probably ultimately special and good about ourselves. And actually internalizing that and then being okay with like, you know what? I really fucked up that conversation.
Yeah.
And that person came away with a pretty bad impression of me. Oh, well.
Yeah.
That's a shame. They're wrong. They're the good. Everyone's impressions of each other are wrong all the time.
Yeah.
We all walk away with incorrect notions of each other. None of our impressions are right. That's okay.
And
I should
recognizing,
still try, but that's okay.
people are probably, when you leave that situation, not really thinking about it as much as you are.
Because they're thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
Also, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a quote from an old novel that's basically about how, you know, we're wrong about people, and then we try to get to know them, and we are wrong again, and then we try to let our guard down, and we get it wrong again. We just get it wrong over and over and over again, and that's all really being a person is, just getting each other wrong forever,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
That's okay.
And that's okay.
And your therapist, did she get you wrong, or they get you wrong?
That was one therapist to go. The new one,
Amazing.
she gets it.
Yeah,
she
give me the
gets it.
number.
Haven't had a session in a while.
Yeah.
Haven't had a session in a
Well,
while.
here
hard
it
to
is.
schedule. It's hard to schedule. We'll do it here. I really did. In 2024, I literally canceled therapy and put a podcast recording in that slot.
So
so I just
good.
recorded a Tuesday podcast
Yeah.
where my therapy had been. It didn't work.
Well, that's what I feel like for us. I mean, listen.
I mean, for better or for worse, we definitely try that out
yeah,
sometimes.
I need to get back into therapy,
Yeah,
but I
same.
do believe a lot of the times that when we have conversations with each other, it is like what we can see as therapy.
Yeah.
You know, even though it's just constantly talking about what you said before, it's like perseverating or like holding on to those negative aspects and then like being able to work through them. I think that's what has helped us feel comfortable. And with our listeners too, it's like having these conversations about like what other people might be feeling, but like talking about it for an hour and a half. It's, therapy is important.
Yeah, I do wonder sometimes too that therapy is important to everybody. If you can get therapy, you should get it. If you can't get it, that's not your fault, and that sucks.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes that a lot of times therapy had been a space for talking about aspects of yourself that there was a stigma around talking about, and those stigmas are fading.
Yeah.
Right? Like it would have not there was not a place like for like this conversation, like for me to be like, oh yeah, I had like terrible body image issues. Whatever it is, like whatever
Right.
aspects of like we're giving ourselves the space to be honest about these human things that before we just wouldn't have talked about, and maybe only in the safety of like a conversation with a therapist or like someone very close.
Yeah. And I think with the older generation or our parents' generation, it's like it wasn't as normalized. So sometimes I talked through these things with like my aunts or my uncles or my parents, and they're like, all right, like you don't think that I dealt with that either? Like it's okay. Like you'll move on. I'm like, okay, but we actually need to unpack some things that you're dealing with too. It's like normalizing talking.
Truly inconceivable to have a conversation like that with anyone.
It's crazy.
Yeah, my parents' generation, just absolutely inconceivable.
No.
Don't want to talk.
Is there any of that vulnerability that you've shared publicly that you regret? Like, because I feel like for us, we will have these really deep public conversations, and we are still working through body image and anxiety and everything in between that of self-acceptance. And I feel like there are times when we'll look back and be like, oh, we really like published that. Like that's really just out there forever. And as someone who's had a far more illustrious career, more public career, are there moments where you're like, fuck, I kind of wish I held back?
That's a good question. I don't have any regrets of sharing anything about myself. And they're not like personality aspects that I protect. Like, I think that if you've been a listener to Love It or Leave It over the years, like I think you have a pretty good grasp of what my sensitivities, anxieties, challenges are. Like, I don't think you're missing anything big. I don't have any big secrets. I think there have been times where I'm careful because they invoke other people, or like that you're describing a situation in which someone else might not look good or which someone let you down, whatever it might be. And I really try to avoid doing that.
Yeah.
Not because I think I couldn't or that I owe anybody like secrets, but more that it feels unfair sometimes, I think, to me to like, or mean to talk about other people, even if you're doing it anonymously. And so I do avoid that. And then I was in a relationship that wasn't public, and then it was public, and then it ended. And that was challenging. And it was strange. It was really strange. And I don't regret it. And I don't know that, and it's hard, right? Because part of the shows that I do are about talking about politics in a way that feels like you're hanging with friends. And part of that is just talking about your life. And I don't want to not talk about my life. Yeah. And then you talk about your life and you share something, and then that relationship no longer exists. And obviously, for what I just said a moment ago, you're not getting all the details, and you'll never. And you'll share positive stories about a relationship, and then that relationship will end. And you don't share the reason it ends. You just don't. And I'm not going to. And I never would. Because that's not for you.
Private. Yeah.
And so that's a little bit strange, and it makes me think about, okay, well, what about the next time? Right. Yeah. And what's the right way to do it? Because I do actually want to talk about like when you're happy, you want to talk about it.
Of course.
You know? So that's hard. But for the most part, I think let it rip.
Yeah.
I think let it rip. And you guys put a disclaimer on, you're like, hey, in this episode, we're going to talk a lot about gay sex. So, hey, Mom, you can just steer clear of this one. And
Mom,
if you listen, don't talk to me about it.
Yeah.
I will.
That's verbatim. You're directly quoting.
Yeah.
That's exactly happened.
Appreciate that.
And so my mother texts me about Love It or Leave It and Pod Save America a little bit like a German spy, letting the person they're spying on know that they're being watched.
Yeah.
Like, I'll just get a text. I'll just be like, interesting, Aunt Sedell, huh? And like, when did I mention Aunt Sedell on a podcast?
You're going through it.
What the fuck?
Yeah, no, it's exactly
it's
that.
like, oh, she doesn't miss a beat.
Yeah.
She doesn't miss a beat. Do your parents listen?
I do believe that my mom listens to every single episode.
I love that it's unconfirmed.
It is
a theory that we have.
To your point, it's like my mom will text me out of nowhere and just be like, listened this week. And you're like, okay. Like where is the follow-up? And there's like never any follow-up. So you're like, and then you're in your head and you're like, oh, she hated it. What did I say? I'm going through the episode. I'm like, what does she know about me? But yeah, she definitely listens to every single episode. And I think at the beginning it was like tough for me to have candid conversations with Joe because I didn't come out until I was 23. 28 now, so it's only been 5 years, but we started the podcast, 2 years ago, and I was a very private person. So now I'm sharing all of these stories, and I'm sharing all of the things that I was going through as a kid, and I was knowing that my mom was listening, and I was like, this is really hard for me to share because I'm going to go back home because it's Long Island, and I live in Brooklyn, so every Sunday I get a text to be like, are you coming home for dinner? And I'm like, okay. But like I knew those dinners were going to come, and then it would be like, you talked about this. Why couldn't you feel comfortable telling me these things? I'm like, okay, I wasn't starting the podcast to have these conversations, but they do come up. So
I find that for me, it's not my closest friends or parents or closest relatives or strangers. It's the in-between people that I'll be like, oh, like, you can hear this?
Yeah.
Everyone in between?
Yeah.
The random acquaintances?
Yeah.
The friends of acquaintances or the friends of friends texting their friends saying they just heard this thing?
Yep. And then they see you and they're like, then they're talking about it. And you're like, what are you saying? Because I don't remember anything that I say on this podcast.
Did I tell you this personally? Like, did we have this conversation? But also, it is funny because it does, in some ways, it feels invasive. And then I'm like, I'm actually begging people to listen to this. Like, actually, weekly, we're like, please, please, please listen to this podcast.
And send it to your friends.
And then we're like, how could you possibly listen to this?
Right. Yeah. But that's right. It's like, it's like,
not you, everyone else.
No, right. But it's voting. It's just like it's like, oh no, you've gotten everything you want.
Yeah. Oh no, it's working.
Yeah.
Now what? Yeah.
Yeah. And it is working for you too. Look at you.
It's working.
Look at us high up in this office tower.
Crazy?
High above the ground.
Spotify.
So far above the ground. Looking the Statue of Liberty well below
right
us.
below.
And really
so
scary
far
elevator.
down.
The elevator is so scary. Today we were going in it and it just like closed 1/3 of the way and stopped. And we were like, okay, what's going to happen? And then it just opened back up and slowly closed. And you're like, okay, so now I'm going to go up 70 floors.
In about
it's over.
20 seconds.
So I hate to just harp on Long Island because we're going to talk about a bunch of other things.
Talk about whatever you want.
What is your relationship to the island now? I think that you grew up seemingly in a very progressive household, but I don't think that's like very much the case for a lot of Long Island, especially looking at the election season. It's a very interesting place. I always say it's like you take the Deep South and you put it in the North, and people are driving pickup trucks with the Trump flags in the back. But what is your relationship to the island now?
I don't know her. Where we're at. But first of all, like it wasn't. I think my parents, like my mother is a Democrat. My grandfather was like a big Bernie Sanders guy. He's like a working class Jewish guy, and that generation was just like FDR Democrat, loved Bernie. My mother is a Democrat through and through. My father is an independent, and he's voted. I think he probably voted for like Reagan, Obama, I think Clinton, probably Romney. I'm not sure. Like he's bounced around, and I think Trump got him. Finally, at long last, this election. Didn't get him the first time.
Yeah.
Or the second time, but I think he got him this time. And so it wasn't, so politically, I think it was more like normal for Long Island. It was, but to my parents' credit, they were very like, they handled the gay thing right.
Yeah.
They weren't ready for it, and they were surprised by it, which I think was in part because I was so closed off. It wasn't like I was, I am like much, I think, more comfortable, and I think I read more gay now than I would have then. I think I was much more closed down.
When did you come out?
I came out the summer after high school.
Okay.
Which is the year 2000.
Wow.
That's right. That's how long ago.
No, that just feels very monumental.
Yeah.
No, it was a big millennium shift for me. It was all about that. It was all about
going into college.
I was going into college. And I was just going into college, having figured it out. And I slowly told people once I got to college.
Yeah.
But that was when I started doing it. And then I actually, and this is something that if this feels right to you, this isn't for everybody, but this was my strategy to force myself to come out to my parents.
I can't wait to hear this. Yeah.
Which is, I told my parents, I said, Mom and Dad, I have a very big piece of news that I'm telling you tomorrow. It's not bad, but it's really important. And I can't talk about it today, but I can tell you tomorrow.
I think that would kill me.
And
I think I would die.
But here's what this did.
Here's
what this did. It went from, I have something I need to psych myself up to reveal.
Okay.
I offloaded all the emotional labor to my parents my mother is basically begging me. She's like, what is it? What could it be? And so by the next day, I
They're on
had to
edge.
do it because my only two options were to either, I mean, what are my options? It was to either pretend I was
Yeah.
kidding, make something up that justifies the scale of what I
Yeah.
promised, or just tell them. So I told them. I was like, I want this for my future self. I don't have the ability to do it today, but
Yeah.
I know I can force myself to do it tomorrow. So we're doing this tomorrow.
That's such a good way to look at it. You love a deadline. You're like, tomorrow
Yeah.
I'm giving myself
I
a
need
deadline.
deadlines. Listen, like I'm another person who's self-diagnosed ADHD, and I need a deadline.
Yes. Do you think that your parents were that night having a conversation? They're like, what the hell is John going to tell us?
If I remember, it was that I said I would tell you I said it in the morning, and I said I will tell you tomorrow. But by the end of that night, my mother was like, you can't leave me. Like she was like beside herself. You have to. What is it? What is it? We're nervous. We're scared. And then I told them.
That's even better. So
Yeah.
you got it done day one.
It was fantastic.
But
Yeah.
it's actually incredible advice.
That's a really, yeah.
If you want to tell your parents that you're gay, or it's 20 years later trans,
Yeah.
you know, which is the new gay.
Yeah.
And gay is the new straight.
Yep.
And straight
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Straight doesn't
no.
exist.
It's not real. It's not real.
It's weird. It's quite frankly weird. So who are like? I think for you, obviously, you're a comedic genius when it comes to so many different things. But
Sure,
like,
yeah.
do you have any inspirations, like at least even now or previously, that like helped you get to the point that you're at right now? And you could
You know
just be
who it was?
self-inspired.
I inspired myself. It was. Have you ever seen any of the old Eddie Izzard specials?
No.
Eddie Izzard did this special, a couple of them that I just loved. Their persona on stage was just Eddie Izzard. It wasn't drag. It was just Eddie
Yeah.
Izzard in makeup and feminine clothing, doing just stand up. Like
Yeah.
the clothing it had nothing to do. It wasn't a drag performance. It was just stand up. But for whatever reason, being in a form of drag was part of the persona of this kind of aloof, disconnected observer. And I always appreciated that. And like I always felt like that was what being gay, and then also at times like being willing to dress in a more feminine way, it kind of gives you space to watch everyone and their doings and their comings and their goings. And I really like that. Eddie Izzard was important to me. But so was Seinfeld, so was SNL, and you know, at the time, Louis C.K. at the time, just because it was so natural. And I feel like now the person that I think does that version of stand-up that just feels like 1 hour without a single joke, but it's funny the whole time, is Tig.
Yeah.
He's amazing at that.
Yeah.
And you're just along for the ride. It never lands, but it's just
Yeah.
always funny.
Story.
Yeah. That feels so effortless. But I loved also just like the old Catskills Jewish comics, like George Burns and the old roasts. I love that old Jewish stuff. Like I remember like I think it was George Burns would order a martini, and I didn't really know what a martini was, but that's why I tried a martini. It was because George Burns, who lived to be over 100, he made a movie called I think 18 Again, where it's a swip swap. It's a body. You know, he's his nephew or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I love that. And then I read like that George Burns, every time he finished a show, he would go have a steak and a martini. And so that's when I started ordering martinis.
It's like a
Do you
health
like them?
plan.
What? Exactly. As a longevity play, but also, and do I like them? Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, martinis,
Dirty or with a twist?
classic.
Okay.
A classic gin martini.
Oh, wow.
Olives, vermouth, not dirty. With olives, but not dirty.
Okay.
And martinis, first 10 sips, great.
Yeah.
And then you got a warm thing. And that is
Yeah.
the challenge.
But I feel like after
and that
10
is the challenge.
sips, you're just kind of like,
You're
all
in.
right, I'm feeling it.
Yes,
I'm
and
feeling
you are
good,
feeling it.
and I'm gonna take down the rest.
Yeah, it is funny that it's become sophisticated to order a dry vodka martini, which is really just a glass of vodka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can just get that. You can just order a glass. If you want a glass of vodka, you can just order it. Say, I'd like a glass of vodka, please. I'm an adult and I'd like to order a glass of vodka. You could do that. You don't have
Yeah.
to dress it up and say,
That seems more
bring
of
me
a
a martini.
problem.
What?
Yeah,
Well,
that
yeah,
seems like more of a
it's-
problem
it's
when you're just saying
definitely
I want
masking the problem there.
a dry martini. That's why I'm like extra juice, please.
Yeah, that's nice.
I want ocean water. If it's not, if it doesn't taste like I'm drowning, I don't want it.
I was at a bar recently and I ordered a dirty vodka martini, and then I took a sip of it and I was like, like it's not dirty. Like it just simply was not dirty. And I asked, I was like, hey, can I just get like a little bit more olive juice on the side to pour it into it? You would have thought that I told this man I hated him and his entire family. The face that he gave me, I was like, it's like telling him how he should do his job. And I understood. He was very upset. It was weird. Maybe he was going through a bad day.
Yeah, it's possible.
I don't think. First of all, you did nothing wrong.
Okay. Because
You
know
did
I've been like thinking about it for the
nothing
past
wrong.
month.
You should not. You did nothing wrong.
Okay, cool.
And
I needed to hear that.
I think that I think that it is okay to respectfully and kindly say, sir, thank you so much. I wanted something slightly different.
Yeah.
And I know that means we have to have this conversation.
Yeah.
But I hope it's a good conversation for both of us.
Right.
And a chance to learn and grow. And I would like this to have more olive juice in it.
Yeah. It was the learning curve.
And that seems to be something that's possible for you. And if it were to happen, everyone is happy.
Exactly.
Everyone can walk away from this feeling good about our relationship.
Right.
It's a really good way to put it. I feel like for so long in my life, even like when you order coffee and they give you the wrong order, I take that order and I walk out the door.
Yeah.
I'm like
Always.
actually sick thinking about I need to go up to that employee and say, that's actually not what I got. I'm like, whatever it's the pleaser. It's the people pleaser.
Yeah, but it's okay to take up a little bit of space
Yeah.
in this world. It's okay to go back up to that counter and say, I'm so sorry. I mean, look, if the place is overwhelmed, if someone's already in the midst of their bad day, it's a case-by-case situation. For example, at a Chipotle.
Yeah.
You know Chipotle.
Familiar.
Burritos,
Familiar.
you know
I
about
know-
Chipotle,
yeah,
right?
I
know
So
a
there's
few
meat
things
here,
about
and then
it.
there's some other things,
Right.
and they can mix it all. It's kind of it's an assembly line. You know Chipotle.
Yeah.
Of course.
You can get a burrito, you can get a bowl.
Absolutely.
You can get a salad, but that's for lunatics. You understand.
yeah,
you know
yeah.
Chipotle. You know
Yeah.
Chipotle.
Yes.
I would say- I
I
know
would say
Chipotle.
I know Chipotle.
I would say that we
And you know
know
they have
like
lots of
hacks at
salsa
Chipotle.
kinds.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's chips. You get chips on the side.
Yeah, there's
Always.
And you know that
Yes.
they do guacamole, but it's extra.
Yes.
It's
And you know it's
extra.
extra.
Yeah.
But they
And you
put
know
out
that when they-
so much that it's almost sometimes you're like, whoa.
It sometimes is too
almost
much.
is they should charge less and give you less.
Yeah.
But then when they put it in the little cup, they do that weird way of putting it in the cup that leaves a little space, and it's like, who are we fooling?
And you know
So
the sour
Chipotle.
cream. You know
and
the
you know
sour
the sour
cream.
cream.
Yeah.
So you know Chipotle.
I think so.
I think we know of them.
So a Chipotle burrito, it's what it is. You know what it is, and it's good.
And it's big.
But if you ask them to mix it, and say, hey, would you mind mixing this? They will go into a drawer, and they will take a fork and a spoon, or a spoon and a spoon, or a fork and a fork, and they will mix all the ingredients.
Like a chopped salad.
And then they will close your
Oh
burrito.
my God.
And it improves the burrito dramatically.
Of course.
You've never known.
And
You
we
didn't know
didn't know
about this.
Chipotle at all.
So you thought-
actually,
so
is what-
actually, I don't
we
think you know
thought we knew
Chipotle.
Chipotle.
But so
And of
now, do you
course.
understand what I've just told you? What this does? What
So-
this means?
Well, I'm actually in disbelief because, yes, a lot of the times when I would get a burrito, I would bite into it and it would be like
Pure
a
sour
straight
cream.
shot of sour cream down
Yeah.
the throat, which sometimes is nice.
Sure.
On
It
the
depends on
situation.
what
Yeah.
you were looking for that day.
Right, as long as with consent.
Yeah.
With consent, I want sour cream down the throat. But I think to your point, the chopping it up and mixing it, every bite is the same.
And you're getting what you want. And the thing is, with sometimes you bite into a Chipotle burrito and you're like, this is the meat side. My dessert is rice today.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be eating
Worst case
rice.
scenario.
I'm gonna
scenario.
end with rice today. But if they mix it, what an experience!
What an
experience!
experience.
Dramatically improves the burrito experience.
I
However, they don't want to do that.
no.
It's not the best part of their day to have
Right.
to do
Yeah.
that. I
Right.
understand that. So if it's a busy Chipotle, I'm not asking.
I get that.
But if it's quiet, if it's just us,
yeah.
if there's not a line behind me,
Yep.
I'll say, "Hi,
Hi.
would you mind mixing it? Is that okay?"
Yeah.
And be like, "Sure." And then I'm having a better day. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to take up a little bit of space
Yeah.
to have a slightly better burrito.
I
And I
can't
don't
even
think that's
believe
wrong. And I don't think that's wrong.
No, that's not
I
wrong.
don't think
that's
that's
so
wrong.
right. That is so right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You didn't know about that.
That just
No.
shifted my whole perspective on Chipotle because I think for a while I haven't walked through the doors of Chipotle in a second.
Okay.
I think I was going more towards
I
the
will say
Qdoba
the
route.
Williamsburg Chipotle, which is the closest Chipotle to us, was
Hell on earth.
recently shut down for health purposes and has recently reopened, but just something to consider.
I thought
Those are the
you
best
were going
Chipotles
to tell
in the game.
me.
Safest Chipotles, no lines.
Yeah, that's
A
true.
post health scare Chipotle, sign me up.
easy.
Sometimes they just give you the burrito and they say thank you for coming in,
Yeah.
and that's a free burrito.
And you're like, that's perfect.
Those are the cleanest Chipotles in the world.
Absolutely.
That's true. That is true. Definitely the cleanest.
Are you ever bowling? I don't want to just talk about
About
Chipotle, but
Chipotle.
now I'm like, now my mind is just Chipotle. Are you ever bowling it with the tortilla underneath?
No, I'm
Oh,
not
you were
savage.
upset. You're not savage.
No,
I think that's like the most iconic move.
It's kind of elegant, I would
It's
say.
because I'll tell you why it's elegant. Now we're gonna go into it. Have you ever been to Chipotle? Okay. So what it is, it's like you put that tortilla underneath.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mix the bowl, so like that sucks. But you can self mix there.
You can self-mix.
right? And that for me, it's like I can do the work.
So now
I
we're
have to do the dirty
we're
work.
ripping and we're eating little bites. What are we doing?
No. That's what you thought. So I'll get the chips on the side, and I have.
And
the
we're having
op-
chips. And okay.
Yeah, no,
That's
it's
exciting.
I like we're not even shaming here. It's like this is
No, I'm loving it.
amazing. So you're dipping the chip into the bowl itself.
Yeah.
You get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm like done with these chips, and there's still a good amount left. Oh my god, I have the tortilla underneath the bowl. I'm making my own burrito.
Wow.
So and that plate, there's a satisfaction in knowing that when you pick up that tortilla, there's nothing in that bowl. It's clean.
Right.
You got every last morsel.
Okay.
That's just a suggestion from me to you.
That's real.
Yeah.
You know what?
Take it
Thank
as you will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for telling me that.
You're welcome. I just needed, and you held space for that, and I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate that. Thank you.
I feel like a true bystander to something really incredible today. I really, really, really feel like something beautiful just happened.
I'm afraid that once this mixing thing gets out, they're going to put the kibosh on it because there's too much mixing out there. Because it can only, it doesn't work if everybody's doing it.
Right.
The whole system breaks down.
Yeah.
Well, then at that point, the only option is bowl.
Only option is
the only
bowl.
option
The
is
only
bowl.
option is bowl.
But I think that you can trademark. I think that you should work with Chipotle maybe. The
Oh.
Lovett Bowl.
Oh, I
The
like
Love It or
that.
Leave
Yeah.
It.
I like that.
Oh my God, that's easy.
yeah.
The pod. Yeah. Okay. We know somebody who's listening works for Chipotle.
Chipotle
One of these
corporate.
girls, PR,
Yeah.
Chipotle.
Yeah.
That's happening. Wow.
out.
When did you decide that you could start asking for more?
That's a good transition, Joe.
That's a good question.
Just to take it to a full 180.
Well, I think Long Island is a demanding place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up around demanding people. And I noticed I remember when I got to college and had to learn like outside of Long Island, these people are horrified by the manners that I take as normal. And I felt like what I saw growing up was a lot of demanding people with varying levels of rudeness.
Yeah.
And then I remember going to college and seeing people that were just afraid to ask or send things back. And I don't like sending things back. That sucks.
Yeah.
But like people that were afraid to take up space. And Long Island, a lot of people aren't afraid to take up space.
No.
They are in some ways, as we were talking about earlier, but not in commerce, not as a customer.
No, yeah.
As
I had a restaurant.
As
Well,
a beautiful human shining soul, afraid to take up space. As a customer,
Different.
take up space.
that's their space.
That's their space. And so I felt like I like wanted to find, like for me, it was like, oh, can I figure out a way to ask to take up space, but with a kind of like do it in a charming way that isn't rude, and like figuring out how to do that, and when I could and when I couldn't. That's I think part of it. Maybe that's part of what it is in life too.
Yeah.
Like take up space, but in a charming way. That's
Yeah.
the challenge
Well, yeah.
for all of us.
Because then they're allowing it to happen. They're like, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would say that actually reminds me of something you said not that long ago about speechwriting that me and Andrew both jotted down separately.
Wow.
Which
Yeah.
was, and I could not quote it exactly, but to the point, and I believe it was about your survivor stint, where speechwriting is essentially trying to convince a group of people to believe in you. And I would say that parallels exactly what you're saying here. You're kindly trying to convince somebody to believe in you, but you be a Chipotle employee or an audience worldwide. When did you draw that conclusion, and did that come in debate club?
That's like power. That's a power.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I put it to great effect when I got voted out first.
That's
yeah,
crazy.
but that's
that
like,
was crazy.
That's
That was
politics.
And that's politics.
Yeah.
That's politics.
Being a speechwriter, so we were joking about the English regents. I was actually, I did a lot of math. That was more
Yeah.
what I did. And math is about being precise. And you can't almost, it really bothers me that it's sort of like, everyone's like, oh, I wasn't good at math. Oh, I don't do math. I hate math. I'm not good at math. It doesn't bother me because people say it. It bothers me because, like, that's such a collective failure. Like, imagine if like there are so many places where you're just not allowed to say that, right? Like, you're not allowed to be like, oh, like, it's a little bit embarrassing to be like, oh, I'm not good at reading, right? Like, there are people that aren't good at reading,
Yeah.
but like, people feel very comfortable saying it's accepted that you can be a smart person who hates and is bad at math, right? And we all kind of understand that math is separate.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be, and it's because we're teaching it wrong. It's just like, hey, maybe you're teaching too much of it or too quickly or in a way that isn't why should everyone hate one subject? There's a collective us as a society, we collectively hate this subject. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Maybe could somebody figure out what we're doing wrong here?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sucks. But math is about being precise, and it really was helpful in speech writing because speech writing, I think people think good speech writing is like grand, like flowery language. They imagine, and that's when you first become a speechwriter, that's what you think your job is. You like think you're trying to like write the Federalist Papers or like write the Constitution, and you're like, my fellow Americans, we hold these truths, and like that's not good speech writing. That's an impression of what you think a good speech is, and really what good speech writing is trying as simply, succinctly, naturally, authentically to make an argument. Sometimes that can be made with a story about history. Sometimes it's made with policy. Sometimes it's made with a personal story. But at root, it's about finding the best way to clearly make an argument in a persuasive way. And that's true of policy speeches. It's true of wedding toasts. It's true of every speech in every place. And it's why, like, whenever I'm at a wedding, I generally believe that most projects would benefit from my notes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Virtually all of them.
Chipotle.
Yeah, and everyone should be asking me for notes on virtually all projects. And the fact that it's not happening is why
we'll be circling back.
Okay,
Don't say that because we're going to be
this.
texting, yeah.
But whenever I'm at a wedding and somebody starts a speech with, hey, everybody, I'm Jeff's brother. And, when Jeff asked me to speak today, I really thought a lot about what I wanted to say. And I realized that Jeff and I both, we really love golf. And it made me think like, oh, I should speak about what golf has meant to me and Jeff. And it's like, okay, delete all that. The next sentence is the beginning of your speech.
Yeah.
That was all bullshit.
Yeah.
That was the making of your speech.
Yeah.
I don't hear any of that fucking shit. Honestly, let's do some good. Someone out there is preparing for a wedding.
Mm-hmm. Lots of them.
I'm sure dozens. Yeah.
Write your toast, okay? And at the top where you said, I didn't know what I was going to say today, you delete that. And whatever the next sentence is, that's the beginning.
Okay. Do you have a good opener? How would you open Jeff's wedding speech?
I think you can never go wrong with a sup fags.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
'Cause that's persuasive. That's you
Yeah.
got right to the point.
You got everyone's attention.
Because there's no straight people that exist.
Right.
Right.
There you go.
I think that's a good way in for
Yeah.
a lot of.
And then right into golf from there.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
right to golf.
Which is essentially how this episode started.
It did start with that, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I feel bad, and I'll think about that.
From golf
I'll think
to
about
fags.
that.
Yeah, that's how
that's
this
right.
episode is going. Yeah. How are the beaches of Survivor? I'm very, very interested. I'm almost interested because I'm like, I thought down the line I potentially would want to be on Survivor.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like?
So first of all, you should do it.
Okay.
You should apply.
Do you hear that? I should do it? Okay, cool.
The social part is so overwhelming compared to the survival part. It's you're not really. Yes, the survival part is there, but and obviously I wasn't there long enough to truly face the most grueling aspects of it. But sleeping outside in the dirt, whatever. Being covered in sand and feeling gross, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Do you stink? I can only imagine.
Again, I was there for 3 days. So, I'm sure I didn't smell great.
Yeah.
But I've probably in real life smelled worse. But it is more the relentless, especially I grew up on Survivor. I watched the first season when it aired. And it's it's changed and become much more aggressive and social and strategic from the very first moments. And that was very overwhelming. And I told this to Jeff when I was applying. I said, look, I'm a lot of personality. I'm either in for the long haul or I'm going home first. And so I felt it happening, and it was like, oh, you're so enmeshed in these intense social dynamics that you don't really think about, oh, I feel gross, or like my socks are filled with sand.
Right.
Something that if this were happening in my normal life, I would stop what I'm doing and like deal with it. There's no dealing with it. But you're so like the cameras being there, not really knowing what's going to happen next, not really knowing who you can trust. That's really what preoccupies you. And then the survival piece is almost beside the point.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
But the beaches are
I feel like I
nice.
would crack.
It was beautiful.
I would crack under pressure.
Well, have you? I'm going to
I've
ask you a
watched
question.
a few seasons.
Have you really?
Yes. I've watched a few seasons, and I recently, I would say I started probably 6 years ago. I knew one of the winners. She worked with me. And she was like, yeah, I just won Survivor. I'm like, girl, why are you still here? You know what I mean? But then after that, I started watching a few seasons. She won season 40, I think. Michelle. No, it was 30s. Michelle Fitzgerald.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, and then I saw it and I was like, okay, it is a game of like connection. You're being strategic. I think I have the physicality. I think I would crack under the point that you said that you shouldn't be dealing, like you're not dealing with those things of like, I'm dirty and disgusting and I'm starving. But that's, I think, what would fill my brain space.
What I felt going in, and I feel it's true, is that like I like nice things, but I can handle anything.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was I actually felt like, especially after the first day, we won our first challenge, and I remember trying to like fall asleep, and I was literally lying. I couldn't sleep on the bamboo because it was like, this is too hard. It hurts my back. I'm an old person, and so I just like slept on the ground. And I remember like falling asleep and feeling like, as I was falling asleep, being like, look at you.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping on the ground. You can do this. Out the next day.
Out, done. You're like, okay, 3 days and I'm in, I'm out.
Did you take those learnings though from the show like with you into current situations?
So what was interesting about it, yes, I spent far more time at what they call Ponderosa, which is where they have you kind of hide out after the game before you go back to the U.S., than I spent in the game itself, which was really interesting.
Yeah, I
because
imagine.
I had no phone, no news, which was really actually healthy for me.
Yeah.
And then you're spending time with all these people. Like for me, going on Survivor was like a lark. Like it'll be an adventure, it'll be a challenge. Like it's exciting. And I feel like I love my life outside of this game, and so I wasn't like, my identity wasn't tied up in becoming a survivor. But for a lot of these other contestants, like they've been, and their ambition has been to go on the show for years. They finally make it, and they get out pretty early, and they're devastated, and you really feel for them. So what's interesting is you get voted out, you get back to Ponderosa, and you haven't had a chance to process. And so you're raw. And in one of the ways you're raw, which is interesting, look, we all, in our failures in life, we get hit with the failure and then we process it. And one of the ways we process it is to figure out a story we can tell ourselves and others that is true enough to feel real, but fair enough to ourselves to make us comfortable with it as the narrative we accept and tell, right? And I think for the most part, there's the truth, there's the ego protective version we tell ourselves, which is a little more favorable in our own imaginations about what happened. And then there's the public story that's a little bit more favorable than that, right? And so we have our own version of it that's just for us, and then we have the one we share that's a little bit kinder to ourselves and maybe bigs us up a little. When we fail, it's external factors. When we succeed, it's internal, right? What was interesting is watching person after person do that. Because first they get there and are like, I blew it. This happened. It was my fault. I had this happen to me. They said this. I should have known better. This person didn't. I heard them say that, and I should have thought, that's my fault. I fucked that up. That person, they screwed me, and I saw it coming, and I should have saw it coming. And then you watch over the next like 24 hours as the story starts to form of like how I was the hero and how I was wronged. And I do that. We all do it. Everybody does that. But man, what an education to watch people do that. I learned about the game, but it's also just a really interesting moment to spend with people who like just were handed basically they got fired from their dream jobs. That's what it is to get voted off as Survivor for a lot of these players. It's like they got fired from their dream job and they need to make sense of it. And I learned a lot watching people do that and felt sympathy for them watching them do that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think speaking, like going off of the dream job aspect, I'm really interested from the beginning of when we started the conversation, you were talking about how you always dreamt of, you dreamed of being a writer, a speechwriter. You got these things, you kind of manifested for yourself and you made it work. Now you're at a point in your career where a lot of these dreams came true. You never stop dreaming, obviously.
Never stop dreaming.
What are some dreams that you want to see happen over the rest of your career, if you have one in particular? Or you might already have the dream life.
No, well, it's less about the medium or what it is, and it's more about, I think it's helpful to think less about what it looks like and think more about what it feels like. And so I don't know, like I'm very happy doing what I'm doing and I'll continue doing it. And one of the ways that I find fulfillment and joy is being aggressive about taking these shows, Pod Save America, Love It or Leave It, which are very different, but especially for Love It or Leave It, thinking, okay, this is our 9th year of the show.
Yeah,
crazy. Like, how have we made it this long? We made it this long because we don't take it for granted. And at the beginning of every year, we think, how are we going to do it differently? How are we going to change it? How are we going to adapt? How are we feeling, right? Like, how are we going to talk about politics and culture in a way that feels relevant and rewarding and valuable for people when we're happy, when we're sad, right? And so I really enjoy treating the show like a new show, like a new project. And that's important. Like, even if you're doing something for a long time, like, you have to actually be disciplined in treating it like something new and not just going through the motions. And I'm guilty of it, especially like during the pandemic or in long run, like you starts to become habit, but like get yourself out of the habit. How are we going to make it great today? And that's a challenge in its own. And then beyond that, it's like, I want to be excited and curious, and I want to learn about things, and I want to feel new challenges, and I want to feel like, okay, I get, like right now I talk about politics and like topical stories time after time. What's something that's outside of that, right? Like, what's a version of the kind of like comedy show that I get to do every week that isn't topical, right? What's like a special version of it, or a more timeless version of it? Like, is it scripted? Is it a special? I don't know what it is, but that's how I think about it. It's like how to find the challenge and the curiosity, and what am I excited about?
That's really good advice and really great way to frame it. I think even for us, like we haven't been in the game for that long. It's been 2.5 years, but it is easy to fall into the place of saying like, all right, I'm not excited for today, or like, oh yeah, let's do another episode, but like always looking at it as an opportunity to grow and to be excited about something will continue to further your project. It's amazing.
Yeah, I also just like, it's hard. It's hard, right? No, you're not going to feel that for every day.
Yeah.
You're not. But, and I've like gone through periods where I've absolutely I think about this actually with honestly, I think about it specifically with like body dysmorphia issues. And culturally, people are very uncomfortable hearing from someone in the middle of a journey. They just are. Like, in a way that lacks insight. So what I mean by that is, if you're somebody that's struggling with how you look, if you say something like, I really hate how I look today. I think I'm ugly. I think I'm fat. I don't like the way I look, and I feel really bad. And you can't talk me out of it. And I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to stop. I'm not going to eat as much, and that's just how I am today. People are really uncomfortable with that because what they want is for you to then say, but I know that this is a challenge. I know that I'm handling this wrong. I know. You're supposed to already be at the end of the journey when you're sharing your experiences. And so like, there are times when you're feeling like you're having the emotions you're not supposed to have. Like, I don't want to do this fucking show anymore. I don't feel like that, but like, whatever. Or even though I get to do this amazing thing, I'm sick of it. Or like, I don't want to look at Joe today. I can't even look at him,
That never happens
constantly.
Joe, that never happens.
Once a week.
Once a week. But whatever those things are, like we're trained by therapy and reality shows and the culture, and it's like to be able to say something more like, now I know that this is not how I'm always going to feel, and I know that this is part of a problem that other people are struggling with, and I don't want to encourage that, right? You're supposed to already have the answers, even when you're talking about your own problems. And I think sometimes that's true of people like you're not supposed to admit to certain things on the way. And one of them is, I don't feel like doing this, or I'm not happy, or I don't like this, or this feels like I'm phoning it in today, whatever it might be. And I think sometimes I have to like realize, I had to realize much later and then admit looking back that like, oh, I wasn't bringing my best because I wasn't in the mindset to do it. And I couldn't talk about it because it felt like being ungrateful or it felt like being selfish or whatever it might be. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I feel like you walked in here today and gave, like, you were the therapist that we both are desperately needing to sign back up for. Like, you really, really, I think, spoke to our souls in a crazy way. A crazy
every single
way.
point. Yeah.
From start to finish, the whole episode. I'm kind of gagged.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's crazy.
Sorry to freak you out.
Sorry to to freak you the hell out. But
well, we'll have to pick this up next week.
Yeah. Just let us know what the bill is, truly.
Yeah. But to kind of wrap up the episode too, I do want to play a fun little game.
Let's do it.
Do you love a game?
I love a game.
You love a game. Okay. So it's going to be basically ins and out. So you're going to say if it's in or out, but we're going to call it love it or leave it.
Okay, I got it.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go down the list, just a few different things.
Can't
and
wait.
You can feel free to elaborate or you can just go love it, leave it.
I'm ready.
All right. The first one, chain restaurants.
Love it.
Easy.
Love it. And just, you know, I feel there's a fundamental tension and challenge with the chain restaurant. And here is what it is. It is regretful that every city has the same places. And you go to a place and a lot of places look the same. You go to, like, I travel and do these tour shows and there's always a little district in every city where they used to make objects, physical objects, and now they just have Edison bulbs and high-end chain restaurants.
Yeah.
And that's life. But it does mean that you can get everything everywhere.
Yeah.
So everything is the same everywhere, but everything is available everywhere.
Yep.
But I'm in. I take the bargain. I'm in.
You always can get the bottomless chips and
I
salsa
love
at
it.
Chili's.
And where are you going?
We're going to the Cheesecake Factory.
And what are you getting?
What's the cheesecake of choice? Are you a cheesecake head?
I am. Listen, Adam's Ripple.
We are the same
That's crazy.
person. I knew it. I knew it.
Come on. Now, occasionally, will I go for the second Reese's themed dessert,
course,
but
of
it's not as
course.
good.
No, it's not.
And then
Too much peanut butter.
And too much peanut butter. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you what else. That Snicker branded one.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where I want it to be.
No.
It's not Snickers enough.
No.
It's not Snickers enough.
Just caramel.
It's something. Yes, it's
I
too
know.
caramel forward. It's too caramel
I
forward.
know it.
It's
I
not
know
that Snickers. Yes, there's caramel there, but Snickers are about nuts. It's about chocolate. This is too caramel forward. Yes.
And like Adam just knows.
Adam
and I would love
knows-
to get him in the room.
Adam knows what I want with that Ripple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, we're going to go with ChatGPT. Hot topic.
I'm out. No.
Yeah.
Leave it.
Leave
I
it.
remember the name of my own show. Leave it.
Leave
We
it.
gotta leave it. We gotta leave it. It's bad for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
No.
Artificial person sounding computer.
I will say, like, there are times when I do kind of give into it, and I feel my brain rot. Like, it'll get to the point, like, and I've fully stopped with it, but there will be moments, and I'm like, I can't think of a sentence to write right now, and like, I've been a writer my entire life, and I literally can't come up with 5 words in a row. So there's something beyond the climate catastrophe around it. There's something with the brain that it's
Of course.
scary.
I'm in denial about how much it's being used.
Yeah.
Because I don't use it very much,
Yeah.
but I know people are, and I am in denial about it. I will say one place where it is useful is if you're trying to come up with like a funny name or like a phrase, and you just can't come up with it, and you just say, "Hey, give me 100 of these."
Yeah.
And then it'll start you thinking. It'll
Yeah.
start you thinking. I think if it's starting you thinking, fine. If it's stopping you thinking, no,
Done.
get
If
out.
it's thinking for you.
I also think it's so scary for like the younger generation that like I'm sure if I was in high school, I'd be putting it right in if I had a paper to do. You know? And that's what everyone's doing.
Like we're back to basics.
Yeah.
Hey, every test is in person. Every
Yes.
essay's in person.
Correct.
We're taking out our pens and we're writing in our blue books. Are they still
Yes.
using the blue books? We're using the blue books.
We're using the blue book.
We're back to the blue books.
Yeah.
We're all in person.
Okay.
We're yes.
Head of education.
Yes.
There
Put
you
me
are.
in.
Like
Put me in, Mr. Trump.
coach.
I hate these papers. I don't think we're recording yet. I voted for you because of these paper straws.
All right, the next one is going to be straight men with podcasts.
I love it.
Yeah.
I just simply love it.
Yeah.
And I unironically love it.
I love that. That's amazing.
Can't talk me out of it.
No. The entire story arc, beginning, middle, end, future of George Santos.
Leave it.
Leave
it. It was old before the first iteration was through. It wasn't funny. It was, and like, am I revising history? Did I enjoy it a bit at the time? Yes. I think I'm being a little too.
But you were in the
negative.
middle of it.
Yeah.
Yes,
you
but now
were.
looking back on it, what were we doing?
Right. What were we doing?
He didn't have it.
No.
It would have been so much. It was like we wanted him to have diva energy so badly.
Yeah.
We tried to manifest it. Never had it.
No.
Never had it. Just a grifter.
And for those Long Island Republicans, but that was
That was
so
enjoyable.
good. That
That
was
was
enjoyable.
They
They
loved it.
loved
They loved
that.
it.
Yeah.
They loved it.
I'm sure. All right. Rewatching The Newsroom.
I love it. I think it is great to watch the news from 2 years ago and then make a whole show about how you would have covered things.
There it is.
And I was so proud to be a part of it, and I learned a lot. And there are things I will talk to you both about when we are done with this recording to explain why I loved it so much.
Wow.
Well,
just for
I
us.
love that, actually.
That's
I love
just
that.
for us.
Yeah.
Just for us. The Newsroom. It was awesome to work with Aaron Sorkin. Highly recommend doing that if you can.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's a
We're not
piece of
leaving
advice
that.
for me.
We're loving that.
I think that's a wrap.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's a wrap
absolutely
because now
agree.
I want to hear more off camera. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
being
This was
here.
fun.
I really meant it. You imparted a lot of wisdom that I think we both really needed at a time
Okay,
like
good.
this.
Yeah.
So we're
Good.
very grateful.
And I don't think our listeners need to hear this, but where can everybody find you?
You can find us. So, Pod Save America, we have 2 episodes a week. Catch you up on everything you missed or didn't feel like paying attention to in politics, so you still know what's going on. Or Love It or Leave It, comedy show, out every Saturday on podcast or YouTube. Check it out. I make them for you.
The work doesn't stop.
The
Never
work.
stops.
No, you don't stop.
It never stops.
Until you're on Survivor. You know what I mean? At least
Yeah.
you had a break.
I did. I love that break.
Yeah.
I love that break.
You need another break.
I read a physical book.
Wow.
Wow.
I know. It's
Okay,
pretty
turn your
something.
phone off for another month and let's see what happens.
Dream.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
so
Oh my
much.
gosh. Wow. Joe, that whole episode just made me realize I need to get back into therapy in such a crazy way.
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
was so enlightening.
Yeah.
And I need more conversations like
I
that.
know. It really is really important to have conversations like that. And I think it's really what I love about when we have a guest on is I do feel like because it's such an amorphous, like we don't really know why we bring guests on. Like it's not like they come on to discuss a subject of any kind or even
No.
their life.
No.
Like it usually what sets the tone is how they sit down and what they start talking about.
Yeah.
And that really, it's almost like a tarot deck.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we going to pull today? What are we going to get? And today it really felt like it was a true speech to us,
Yeah.
to everyone out there. And that's, I guess, I mean, part of the reason why John is so successful
Yeah.
at what he does, which is speak to the masses.
Yep. And I think that it's like we bring on guests to obviously to learn from them and hopefully that you can learn from them too. And it's just like good children get greater. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That's a good
Good
way
children
to look at
get greater.
And don't put that into Chat GPT and say, thank you so much. And say, fix the sentence structure and grammar here. Don't. Because it's good children get greater.
I think that's almost
That's
right.
right. It just doesn't seem right.
Well, you couldn't get gooder. You can get better, but that's not what we're trying to say here. We're not worse.
good
We're
to
getting
great.
greater. Yeah, that's right, I think. Good for you.
Thank you
Great
so
for you.
much. Well, an amazing episode, and you know what to do. Don't forget to do your homework. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review. Send it to your friends. Send it to your friends. If you listen to Pod Save America, if you listen to Love It or Leave It, if you don't, now you do. You know what I mean?
And don't forget, you can join us on Patreon every single Thursday night at 8 p.m. EST for a brand new bonus episode. Plus access to a backlog of over, I'm going to say it, probably with 130 to 150 episodes at this point.
And it's like you need to realize, we started this pretty early on. So, some of these episodes, I just think to our oldest apartment balcony having a transcendental conversation. I would say.
Yeah. And I
It's
feel like a lot
wild
of
that it
nudity.
exists. A lot of nudity.
A lot of nudity at that time.
A lot of drugs and alcohol.
A lot of drugs, alcohol, nudity, and transcendental conversations
Yeah.
if you go back to the archive.
Yeah.
You can find us across all social media platforms at Good Children Pod. I'm on Instagram at Joe Hegyes and still somehow on TikTok at Be Quiet Joe.
I'm on Instagram at Andrew Muscarella, and while it exists, on TikTok at Andrew_Muskie.
You're on Red Note?
Not yet. Should I? Should I start popping on Red Note? You
I'm
think that's
shocked
my
you
new?
even knew what it was.
You think that's my new?
Red Note?
Maybe.
Lemon Chiffon was popping up on Red Note.
You're kidding.
Yeah, but then got banned.
Sometimes you gotta lose you to love me,
And sometimes you gotta love it to leave it.
and sometimes you need to love it, but you also gotta have it.
And I gotta
Gotta have
have it.
it.
Let's go to a creamery.
Let's get to a creamery.
See you next week.
See you next week.